We have park run and cycling family are all in here, and Ross can see us and hear us. So I'll get going. Everybody, this is Jo Rowsell Shand, and you can put all questions in to the comments below. Jo, you won't be able to see the comments as they pop up, but the lovely Russell, who's taken over from Kirsty this week, will pull out all the great questions and we'll put them to you at the end. So let's crack on. Hello, everybody. I'm Helen Williams, parkrunner A6014, event director of Harrogate Junior Park Run here in the UK, and alongside Vassos Alexander, co-presenter of the Free Weekly Time podcast. Before we start, I'd just like to recommend that after this conversation, people check out the many parkrun social media channels in the UK and across the world, as well as subscribing to the various parkrun podcasts out there. You'll find me on the Free Weekly Time podcast, but there's also with me now Parkrun Adventurers and the 9:30 Club, to name a few others. So without further ado, for today's question and answers, we are joined by the lovely Jo Rowsell. Jo won. Hello. Let's tell everybody what you have won, which is absolutely amazing. Jo won Olympic gold medals in the women's team pursuit at the 2012 London Olympics and the 2016 Rio Olympics, as well as 5 World Championship titles, 4 in the team pursuit, plus 1 in the individual pursuit at the 2014 World Championships. She's a reigning Olympic and European champion in the team pursuit and reigning Commonwealth Games champion in the individual pursuit, and currently still holds the world records in the 3K and the 4K team pursuit. Jo is also a dedicated park runner, working her way towards that coveted 50 t-shirt with 33 runs completed alongside 10 volunteering instances. Wow, what a way to be introduced, Jo. You are absolutely amazing. I'm not sure we had a current world record holder on our weekly question and answers before. So, I mean, as a start, that's a great place to go. What is it like to have done something faster than anybody else ever in history?
It's pretty cool. And what's cooler is that I expected the record to get broken at the Tokyo Olympics this summer, like possibly like next week. So I'm now retired, so I'm not competing anymore. And normally at Olympic Games, records get broken, that's normal. So I was sort of fully expecting that to be one of the things sort of crossed off this summer, but postponed by a year, Tokyo. So
still yours.
We'll see how much longer we can hold on to that world record for. I fully expect the British girls to beat it sometime over the next year, and hopefully they'll win the gold medal in Tokyo in 2021. But do
you ever get any indication as to how fit they're feeling and that they're aiming for that as a goal?
Yeah. So I speak to a few of them quite regularly. It's weird because you have so much in common with some people. Like you literally, as an Olympic athlete, you're living in each other's pockets. You go to training camps, sharing rooms with each other. You're training together often twice a day, 6 days a week. And then suddenly, now I've retired, you lose that whole big thing that you've got in common with somebody. But it is still nice for me to sort of have that connection to that world and chat to them and sort of see how they're getting on without any of the stress of performing myself. Yeah. So it's quite nice being a sort of step away and be able to sort of reflect on it and not all be quite so serious anymore.
Does that feel nice knowing it's still yours, at least for another year as well?
Yeah, it's a weird bonus. I was supposed to be working out in Tokyo as a commentator this summer. So obviously with the COVID-19 pandemic, life has changed for a lot of people. So I was a bit gutted not to be, some of my travel plans, obviously, to Tokyo haven't happened this summer, but it has meant that, reigning Olympic champion for another year, which is something that I'd never thought would happen, a 5-year Olympic cycle. But I'm also glad that I retired when I did, because had I still been training now for Tokyo, I'm 31, I'm nearly 32. A lot of people said to me, "Oh, you should have carried on to Tokyo," and I was like, "Oh, I think it's a little bit too far. Another 4 years, but 5 years would have really been too far." So quite glad that I ducked out at the right time, as it were.
So let's go back to 2012 and that Olympic experience. So, what was that like from the moment you were selected?
It was an incredible experience. So we found out that the Olympics were going to be in London. I think it was quite a few years ago when I just started cycling. I think it was around 2005. So I'd been talent spotted at my school by British Cycling. They'd gone out to look for sort of new future Olympic talent, and very quite soon after that, it was announced that the Olympics would be in London, which has almost felt like too good to be true. I'm from Southwest London originally, so I grew up in that area. And so I spent my whole sort of getting into cycling, everything was always about the London Olympics. But it's something that you always, you're thinking about it in the distance, but you almost don't dare to dream it's ever going to happen. And it was my first Olympic Games, so I had nothing else to compare to either. I
Mm.
remember going into it thinking, I wish I'd been a couple of years older and been able to have done Beijing and had a bit more experience under my belt. Having now done Rio as a defending champion, I'm now very glad London was my first one, because I think as a defending champion, there's so much more pressure. So I think everyone that competed in London as a Beijing Olympic champion had it far tougher. So I think for me, with London being my first experience, everything was new, everything was exciting, everything was just sort of amazing and overwhelming. And I just sort of took it all in my stride. I had nothing to compare it to. And yeah, fantastic experience.
And that's 7 years. So how old were you in 2005?
Oh, I was born at the end of 88, so I would have been 16, nearly 17, I
So, and
think.
and
Yes,
that
yeah.
that's so that's a long time, isn't it? To be talent spotted and then know that possibly 7 years later is the end goal. That's really hard. How do you train? How do they prepare you to train for something like that with that
Yeah, so I think,
massive
yeah.
goal?
Well, people always talk about the Olympics being a 4 year cycle, but for a lot of people, it's far, far longer preparation because you haven't always done the one before, and you're often preparing for sort of five,
Mm.
6, 7, if not 8 years for that games. And that was always sort of the real long term goal. But you have so many short term goals. So when I was first talent spotted, like you say, I was a teenager. So my goal was to get selected for the Junior World Championships, which I did. And I got a ninth place and 11th place at the Junior World Championships back in 2006, which I was really disappointed with. I'd only been cycling properly for about a year and a half to 2 years. So actually, they were probably quite good results. But back then, I was, distraught that I hadn't medalled in anything. And on all the way throughout your career, we have world championships every year. We have a World Cup season every winter. There's European championships as well. So there's all these other sort of stepping stones. But also, not just that, you're also trying to get your place in the team.
Mm.
So for both Olympic Games that I've been to, we've had, so for London, it was a 3 woman team, but we had 4 girls selected. So you always have a spare person as a reserve, but you never really select as a reserve. You select your team and you wait until really the last minute to get
Mm.
the best 3 girls on the start line.
Yeah.
So you spend a lot of that, 7 years preparing, sort of trying to get your spot in the team as opposed to thinking about the actual Olympic final.
Yeah,
A lot of
yeah.
it is very much focused on getting there.
Amazing. That's a lot. That's quite a lot. I suppose you need the bite-sized chunks, don't you? The races that come in between, because it does feel like quite a long. I mean, when you're 16, that's you know, it's nearly half of the life you've already lived already, isn't it? So 7 years is such a big goal. What were the Olympics like themselves? What was it like that first experience?
Yeah, so at that point, I'd been a world champion 3 times, and we were also world record holders. We were World Cup winners. So I went into it having done a lot of work with our team psychiatrist, a lot of sort of preparation of the mental side of sport, really telling myself that it's just another race. It's the exact same girls I've been racing against all around the world. It's a velodrome, it's 250 meters. It's probably going to be the same sort of officials and commissaires, their judges, that sort of thing. It's just another bike race. It's up to us to get on the track and do 12 laps as fast as we can. It's nothing, more complicated than that. Of course, the Olympics isn't just another race. And although when you simplify it in terms of performance, it is the same, but the whole process is different. Like normally when we go to a competition, we're staying in a hotel, whereas here we were in Olympic Village, which is just a whole like completely different world. You sort of see massive superstars sort of wandering past you in the dining hall. There's all this free food, there's free McDonald's, and you just surrounded by temptation. You're surrounded by athletes that have already finished competing, on the first weekend of the games that are sort of
Mm.
now rightly so enjoying themselves. And it's quite overwhelming. And suddenly you think, this is the biggest race of my career, but actually everything around me is different. Like my normal environment has completely changed. So it took a lot to really, obviously I was completely focused on the race, but it took a lot to really sort of blank out all the distractions.
Yeah.
I really wanted to be able to enjoy that, but you really can't before your race and really just focus really hard on the performance. And of course, once we did it and once we won the gold, I made the mistake of not turning off social media notifications on my phone. So my phone was like having a meltdown with Twitter and Facebook and whatever else, and messages of people I've not heard from since school. And it was then that I realised the Olympics is really not just another race. There's people that watch the Olympic Games that don't watch sport at all for 3 and 3/4 years, and then those few weeks over the summer they become sports fans, and it reaches out to so many more people globally, and yeah, completely overwhelmed.
Massively. I mean, do the sports psychologists prepare you for that moment when you get into the village? How long are you in the village before your race? How were you there? Weeks, days?
No, less than a week. So we
Okay.
had a preparation, we called it a holding camp, at the Celtic Manor in South Wales in Newport. So there's a velodrome in Newport, which we basically had sort of exclusive use of for 2 weeks before the Olympics. And we're staying in a 5-star hotel. Like, we don't normally have that sort of luxury as cyclists, very, very far from that. But, it was sort of really, all in for that last 2 weeks of training. Then we travelled by coach over to London maybe 5 or 6 days before our race.
Okay.
So less than a week to go. They'd already had the road race, the men's road race on the first weekend. We'd watched the opening ceremony from the hotel. Chris Hoy had gone over as the flag bearer, so he'd left the training camp, but the rest of us were sat watching it on TV in the hotel. So you feel quite disconnected at that point. But then once you
Yeah.
get in the village, it all seems very real. And like I say, some people have already finished by that point. If they were racing the first weekend, they're done, and you're coming in ready to get started in a few days' time. So yeah, very strange experience.
And so the race obviously was really close, and you beat the USA by 5 seconds. And with Tom and I were just talking beforehand because we've seen there's such a fine line between perfection and clipping someone's wheel. So for us watching, we just see this race just go in front of, where we're all sat shouting at the telly, but it just looks like everything's perfect. But, it would take just nothing for you to clip somebody's wheel. How aware of that are you when you're going round as to how, like, are you aware of how you're doing in terms of where you are in position, and how do you get it right?
Yeah, so we obviously spent a lot of time training for it, a lot of time practicing together as a three, really sort of drilling those skills as much as all the physical training. In the actual race, so we start on the opposite side of the velodrome to the other team. So to begin with, normally for the first 6 laps out of 12 that it was in London, our coach we call it walking the line. So basically he acts as a stopwatch, and we pick a lap split that we want to aim for each lap. So for example, I don't know, 15.5 seconds. And if we go too slow, so 15.6 seconds, he takes a step down away from the line. And if we go 15.4, he takes a step up. So he's essentially our stopwatch, so we know how fast we're going lap by lap. And it is to a tenth of a second that we sort of have that precision. And then for the second 6 laps, he then walks the line to say if we're up or down on our opponents, because at that point, sort of pacing sort of goes out the window, and it's a bike race at the end of the day. But in London, because we did win, that's quite a big margin in cycling to win by sort of 5 or 6 seconds. That's one of the bigger ones,
Yeah,
trust
yeah,
me.
yeah.
And towards the end of the race, I remember swinging up the track. It must have been a lap and a half or so to go, and I could see the American team not just out of our sight. I just caught a glimpse of them. At that point, I knew very much that we were winning. And I think my last thought was, nobody fall off,
Yeah.
which is a really sort of strange thing to be thinking in the last lap of the Olympic final. But I remember thinking, like, we have got this.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
let's not mess this up now. But yeah, compared to Rio, that was a very comfortable margin. Oh, sorry, my cat is just say hello. She's just taken a little
Oh.
jumped over me. So yeah, no, it was we spent a lot of time sort of trying to prepare for that, and like I say, the coach gives us a lot of feedback, but also at an Olympic Games, the crowds give you so much feedback, because we had the whole crowd behind us, and that if the crowd are quiet, that is a bad sign. And when the crowd are going wild, that they're cheering for you.
Yeah,
So we had the
yeah.
opposite situation at the World Championships in Australia, where the crowd were going absolutely wild. We were against the Aussies in the final. And then in the last few laps, the crowd just went silent. And I thought, I think we've got in the lead then. We ended up winning that one against the Aussies. So you can tell a lot by the crowd noise as well.
I mean, you must need amazing. I suppose you're kind of watching so many things, and you're going at such a pace as well. So to be able to keep an eye on where the coach is on the line, and to be able to keep an eye on where your wheels are, not clipping each other. There's so many more things in there, isn't there? Um, let's go to your park run experience. Let's jump from your Olympic experiences to your park run experience. We've got here that your first experience was as a tail walk. Is that right? As part of the team park run that we did, where Olympic champions had come and joined park run and tail walked at some events. Was that your first park run experience?
Yeah, well, it might have been slightly before that. So I went to a park run almost immediately after the Rio Olympics. They were calling it sort of like a Team GB Sports Day. It was like a late weekend in August, and Team GB athletes went to sort of sporting events around the country, and Team GB said to me, would I like to go to my local park run? And to be honest, I knew nothing about running whatsoever, because as cyclists, we say, don't stand when you can sit, don't sit when you can lie, don't lie when you can sleep. So definitely don't walk, let alone run. But I didn't really know much about it. So they sent me along to a local event, and I'd pretty much got off the plane the week before from Rio, and I still had I had all my kit and my medal with me, and I sort of turned up and sort of said hi to people and signed autographs and stuff. So that was the first time I sort of experienced being at a park run. Then I think the next weekend I signed up to do one myself locally. Took me about 27 minutes, which are now a few minutes quicker. But the funny thing with that is I was probably the fittest I've ever been in my life, but just really not running fit at all. So I found the downhill bits, like I wanted to sit down on the grass and roll down the hills. I found them that hard to run downhill. Uphill, I was springing up the hills, like cycling muscles are made for running uphill, but downhill really, really not so much. And I finished the event, and it's like my heart and lungs weren't really working that hard, but my legs were absolutely killing me. And I had really like a week's worth of DOMs. So I think the next time I went back, I went back as a tail walker, and I've sort of built up a little bit since then.
So what was it that pulled you back? So obviously you've gone kind of as you know, in your profile, and you've gone as Joanna Rowsell, Olympic champion. What was it that made you go back and sign up?
I think I was totally inspired by the event myself. So I loved that it wasn't a race, and I loved that I could be average at it and it didn't matter. I loved that, obviously when you've just competed at Olympic Games, you've got all that pressure. It was nice to do sport for fun, which I hadn't done, for about a decade. And, the last decade of my life had been professional sport, and it does eventually sort of, you do enjoy it, but it does sort of suck the fun out of it at times when it is your job. So it was nice to do it for fun. It not be too serious, everyone there sort of being supportive, and just the sort of community atmosphere. But I was also quite keen. I knew quite, well, not that soon after it, but a few months after Rio, I decided I was going to retire from cycling. But I was very keen to stay fit and stay active, because I do enjoy, I enjoy sport for the fun of it, not just the competing side of it. And it just seemed a really accessible thing to do as a complete running amateur, and a sort of environment that you're completely accepted into, and people aren't judging you. And I've had a few people say to me, "Oh wow, I'm beating an Olympic champion," and I'm like, "Yeah, well done you." Like I'm it's a nice environment. So I enjoyed it from day one, really. And I've got the bug with trying to get to my t-shirts. So like you said, I'm on 30 something park runs. My aim was to get to the 50 t-shirt this year and the 25 volunteer t-shirt, but I'm not doing so well now. So
I know.
I'll have to catch up when we
So
start up
many
again.
people are so close to so many of those milestones. But you've got a lovely story about your dad, because you did. So you tail walked, and that was in August
Yep.
2017, and you did go
Yeah.
back, and you obviously went back
Yeah.
yourself, but you also went back with your dad, didn't you?
Yes, yeah. So my dad has always been sort of relatively active, but never a runner by any means at all. He's always been the sort of person that gets a lot of steps in each day. But then he had an accident. It was winter 2016, where he broke both of his kneecaps, which was pretty bad. He was in hospital for, I don't know how long for, at least a week. He had surgery. The surgeon sort of put his kneecaps back together with wires and whatever else they do. And it was obviously quite a long rehab process. And he went from like not being able to walk at all to getting on crutches. And, for someone that's normally walks everywhere and is very active, that was obviously quite difficult for him. But once he sort of got through his sort of first phases of physio, and they were giving him the all clear to do a bit more, I said, why don't you come and do the park run? It's 5 kilometers, that's 3 miles. Like, normally you can walk, that sort of distance, no problem. And I was like, you don't have to run it at all. Trust me, people walk around it. Like, it's really not a competition. You can do whatever, you can stroll around the whole thing. It's really fine. And he came along, did that first one, probably went a bit too hard and sort of was trying to run it and walk it, possibly was not quite ready for the running side of it. But he really got the bug. And I got him a running watch for Christmas one year, and he looks at all his splits, like, for his kilometers. And he was going pretty much every weekend, and getting his times right down. He's definitely under 30 minutes. I think he might be around 27 minutes, actually, his PB. But he started off around the sort of, I don't know, 45-minute mark. And
That's
he
amazing.
loves that it's like, he can see that progression. And I love that for me, it's something that me and him can do together now. Like, there's not sort of, as a cyclist, I never cycled with my parents at all. It just wasn't something that I was doing. It was my job to train and, go out and do my power outputs and my heart rate zones and whatever. But now me and him can go to park run, and either we can run round together or we can run round separately, or and it's just lovely.
Yeah, and loads of people are commenting. They just love the fact that you can go, a world record holding elite athlete in your prime, and you can just go and enjoy the parkrun community. And I think everybody really enjoys being able to just be humans next to each other. I think it's one of the
Yeah,
really special things about parkrun, isn't it? So you've
yeah,
now got a PB of 21 minutes, and you represent Shropshire
yes,
Shufflers.
yeah.
How does it compare with chasing world records, and being able to say, if anyone says, oh, what have you done, yeah, I've got two Olympic golds
Yeah.
hanging up,
Yeah,
what's
I
that
find
like?
I get recognised quite a lot at park run because you're obviously sort of naturally getting quite a lot of sports fans, so quite a lot of people do recognise me, and I have done quite a lot of the Well, I think I'm on 10 volunteers now, which I really like volunteering because it really sort of gets you in with the sort of community of it, and it
Yeah,
gets me up in the morning as well because it can be hard on a weekend if you've been up early in the week. But if I've signed up to volunteer, there's no excuses to get out of it. But for me, I think as an athlete, I spent a lot of my career trying not to compare myself to others, which
yeah,
sounds weird given my job was literally to race against other people and try and come out on top. But a lot of my sort of ways of dealing with the pressure of elite sport was to really ignore the people I was racing against and really just focus on doing my best performance. And I quite like that I can still have that mentality with something like park run. Like I can go along and I could be like, I want to do my best run I can do and I want to
yeah.
see how fast I can go. But equally, if I have another week where I'm tired and I don't really feel like it, I can jog round far slower and no one bats an eyelid, and that's just cool. And I like that. I like that you can have complete both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
I can tail walk, I can volunteer, I can marshal, I can give out the finish tokens, I can scan the barcodes, and no matter sort of how you feel it, you can get involved in some way, which I like that I've got sort of both sides of it there.
Yeah, you can tick all of the boxes, that's right. So you've been really open about living with alopecia since the age of 10, and you're
Yep,
now an ambassador for Alopecia UK.
yep.
Can you describe alopecia for people who might not know what it is?
Yeah, so alopecia is a sort of an umbrella term meaning hair loss. So alopecia areata is a type of hair loss where you sort of lose patches of hair, and that can range in severity from just having patches of hair loss to having full hair loss. As long as I can remember, I had sort of patchy hair loss, and I'd been to various doctors and sort of dermatologists as a
Mm.
child, and I'd been diagnosed with alopecia, and they sort of said there's not really much they can really do about it. So from a young age, that was sort of my normal, that I had patches of hair come and go. And I guess I didn't really know that it wasn't normal for everybody because you don't really spend your time as a child sort
No.
of inspecting people's hair, do you? It's not
No.
really not really the sort of thing that you do. But when I was 10 years old, I had patches of hair that kept sort of falling out. And rather than then growing back, they just continually fell out till
Okay.
I had no hair at all, age 10. Since then, it has grown back a couple of times. It grew back maybe around sort of age 16, around age 19. So it's sort of grown back and gone again a few times. Nowadays, I sort of vary between having sort of patchy regrowth of hair and no hair at all. And it's something that people ask me a lot about how it's affected me. And it's a really difficult question to answer because I don't know how I would have been growing up, from the age of sort of 10 to 20, those teenage years, like they're
Yeah.
difficult years for everybody. And I don't know what I would have been like without the condition. But I think it has made me, I think I was always quite shy anyway as a child, but I think it probably did make me even more shyer and even more scared of sort of putting myself out there and meeting new people. But I remember my parents like really encouraged me to take opportunities and sort of and do different things. And like it's a total cliche, but it's like you only live once. And if I spend my life sort of hiding away in the shadows, not taking opportunities, I'm the one that's going to regret that in however many years' time. So I adopted the attitude of I'm not going to let this hold me back. Um, so I caused almost quite a stir at the London Olympics when I went to collect my medal on the podium. So I'm wearing a wig now. I don't normally wear a wig when I'm on my bike. Definitely not when I'm competing at the Olympics. Like it would be far too hot and heavy,
Yeah.
and you spend all
Yeah.
this time trying
Yeah.
to get aerodynamic. So a lot of the girls shave their arms actually to compete. So that's something I didn't have to do. So one little advantage there for me. But yeah, sort of, I guess I caused quite a stir when I collected my medal at the Olympics without wearing a wig because, you finish the race at the Olympics, you have a matter of minutes, you come off the bike, you get thrust in front of a TV camera for a quick interview where you're not really making much sense, and then you're sort of whisked off to the podium. So it's all a very quick process in cycling, and there's not a long gap in between. So yeah, I wasn't wearing a wig or anything, and I think a lot of people either hadn't heard of alopecia, didn't know what it was, and it just sort of all went a little bit crazy then. And I got approached by various charities to sort of go to events and speak to people and meet people, and various sort of got asked to do loads of different interviews, like print media, TV interviews, that sort of thing, and everyone sort of telling me how well I'd done to cope with the condition, which was it was difficult. I was 23 years old, and it was my first Olympic experience, and the whole thing, like I said, was very overwhelming. So this was a whole extra thing sort of put on me to be talking about in interviews. But I've had so many messages of people, people with alopecia, parents of children with alopecia, that have said to them I've really helped like raise awareness of the condition and sort of show them or show their child that they don't have to let it hold them back. So that's really nice to hear that I have made that bit of difference.
Absolutely.
And like you say, I do quite a lot with the Alopecia UK charity now, and
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
support group meetings and go to events of theirs, and anything I can, really, I think I can fit in. It's a really nice community, and I think it's nice to realize that you're not the only one. Like, it's a condition that you know, you can hide away if you want to, and a lot of people probably don't know how common it is. So it's nice to sort of network with other
With
people in
other
that
people.
situation.
And I think the interesting thing that you say that I think a lot of athletes seem to struggle with is that comparison to others. So, you know, you've said that from quite an early age, you never compared yourself to other people. And do you think that having alopecia kind of gave you the resilience to stop doing that because it was something that just made you slightly different to other children or other people your age? And you just thought, well, I can't control that, so I might as well just crack on and get on with it. And do you think that that helped you stop comparing yourself as an athlete as you grew up, do you think?
Yeah, definitely, in terms of focusing on what you can control. So that was a lesson we learned quite early on as
Mm.
athletes. Like, we were told by Steve Peters, was our psychiatrist, and he always said to us on race day, focus on what you can control. You can't control your competitors. You know, they could go and break the world record by 20 seconds, and you can't control that. And all of sport, like, we were taught from a very early stage, focus on what you can control. You control your warm up, your nutrition, you know, your training, all those sort of things. And I think I probably already had a little bit of that ethos from having alopecia from age 10. And I guess I realized that I couldn't control if my hair would grow or not, like that, you know, I couldn't make that happen, but I could control other things. I could control how hard I worked at school, how well I prepared for my GCSE exams,
Mm.
or, and then when it came to sport, how much I could focus on sport, how hard I could train, all those sort of things that were in my control, they became sort of more important to me, because alopecia sort of takes away this element of control and something that
Yeah,
everyone takes for granted, and suddenly it's gone, and you're like, I can't do anything about that. And I think once you sort of accept that you can't change that and focus on the things that you can affect, you can control, that's probably like a coping mechanism for me, to be
yeah,
able to focus
yeah,
on those
yeah. And
things.
you can push that into a positive, can't you? So, have you got any advice for people, particularly children who might have alopecia and in, you know, not even in sport, in the sporting world? What kind of things do you think help?
I think if you can, try and get along to any sort of support group meeting. Like, I think with so many conditions across the board, meeting other people, talking to people, talking is great. Talking helps in so many ways. If you're not ready for that, then connect on social media. I
Mm.
think there's a lot of negativity surrounding social media, a lot of question marks saying, is it good for mental health in many ways? But actually, in some ways, it makes things really accessible. Like, you can search a hashtag on Instagram, alopecia, and just come up with loads of people with the condition that are sort of posting about their experiences, whether it's selfies or whether it's, sort of general sort of comments about having the condition and dealing with it. Like, it's just so much more accessible now than it
Mm.
was when I was a teenager. Like, I remember sort of having dial-up internet and sort of, like working out how a search engine works. But we could, a lot more information is at our fingertips now. So definitely try and connect with people. And Alopecia UK, for example, they do an annual, well, not this year, but normally an annual trip to Alton Towers, and everyone walks around, either not wearing their wigs or wearing their wigs if they want to. Completely up to you what you want to do, and it's just a really nice experience. When I first went to that, I don't generally go out in public without my wig on. I do sometimes, but I don't really do it. But it was really nice walking around the theme park and realizing that other people like weren't staring at us. Like, there was a whole group of people with no hair and these bright blue t-shirts on saying Alopecia UK. And most people were far too busy enjoying their own day and, focusing on, the rise they were going to go on or whatever. And actually that was quite an eye-opener for me, even like sort of not that many years ago, to realize that a
Mm.
lot of people don't, people are too focused on themselves to really care about what other people look like. So
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah.
can let go of that inhibition yourself, you realise that not everyone is looking at you and scrutinising you as much as
Yeah.
you might think.
Yeah, no, that's a great piece of advice. And you're obviously still super young. And have you got any athletic goals for the future? Have you got any park run plans, running wise?
Definitely back to park run as soon as I can. So I've been enjoying sort of running throughout lockdown. I've enjoyed, like, I was so glad we had the daily exercise thing that we were still allowed to do, because I was going out to eat every day if we either a bike ride or a walk or a run. So I absolutely loved that.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be doing the London Marathon in April this year,
Ah,
so that didn't happen. It has been postponed till October, but there's a big fat question mark over whether that will happen. So at some point, I would like to run a marathon. I definitely prefer shorter running distances to longer running distances. I did a half marathon last year, and it was good, and I enjoyed the experience. But I would love to get quicker at my sort of shorter 5 and 10K
yeah,
distances.
yeah.
But I think a marathon is quite a sort of a bucket list thing that I would like to do, to have that experience and to sort of do that. But yeah, it's a long way. It's a long way to run, especially as a
I
cycling
know.
legs.
Well, yeah, compared to doing 3K and 4K pursuit,
Yeah.
it's such a long way. We've got some nice viewer questions and viewer comments here that I'll ask you before we sign off. So
Okay.
from Pirio Johnson, hello Pirio again. It's lovely. She asks great questions every week. She says, "What's your most memorable parkrun experience?"
Oh, my most memorable parkrun experience. Um, it's going to have to be the first time I went with my dad and he ran the whole way. And me knowing for him how significant that was,
Mm.
and be able to sort of support him and be proud of him, that I think that was really memorable for me. Also, Christmas Day this year at Park was pretty memorable. My local park run in Shrewsbury, that was at the time, that was our largest ever numbers on Christmas Day, which when I tell people, a lot of people are surprised that on Christmas Day you get that many people out. And
It's
I'm
a,
like, well, of course you
I
do.
know, isn't it a
Of
great
course you do.
experience though? The Christmas
So
Day
that
one's
was,
special.
yeah, people in Father Christmas outfits and all sorts of fancy dress. I think there's a T-Rex running around or something. So
Of course.
absolutely fair play to the people that are doing it in fancy dress as well. I think if you can get to a Christmas Day one, if you can, they're always pretty cool.
Brilliant. Paolo Dale says, "What was the decision-making process to retire from competitive cycling and how easy was it?"
Ooh, good question. So it wasn't easy at all. So I retired. I decided to retire. It was about 5 or 6 months after the Rio Olympics. I had a good bit of downtime afterwards to begin with. I was 28 years old, so a lot of people told me that was way too young to retire. Personally, having been an athlete for 10 years, I felt very old. The teammate that was next nearest to me in age was 3.5 years younger than me, and most were sort of about 6 years younger than me. So, in terms of our squad, I was by far the eldest. And it was a really difficult decision because I'd always wanted to retire on my own terms and
Mm.
retire sort of on a high. And, after having a big win and say, right, that's me over and out. I didn't want to get to the point where injury would force me out.
Mm.
But it's really difficult to know when that point is, because if you go too far, you'll end up being forced out through illness, injury, or just not being selected. But if you stop too early, there can be that question of, could I have carried on a little bit further? So I deliberated for a long time. I had a good break after Rio, completely off the bike. I then got back training again, sort of over, December, January sort of time. Then by February 2017, I was like, my heart isn't in it in the same way.
Yeah.
And I think I realized that I'd won 2 Olympic gold medals. Was a third going to make me happier? Like, possibly not. Like, I think I realized that there was going to be more to life that I wanted to experience, more that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
My next plans in life, I'm starting medical school in September, so I'm going to train to be a doctor. So I always knew that I wanted like some sort of other career after sports, and I think if the later you leave that, the more difficult that could potentially be. So it was the right time for me, but it's a very difficult decision to make because it's a huge thing to walk away from as well. It becomes sort of your family. It is your complete life. It's not just a job. It is everything that you do,
Yeah. From the second you
24/7.
wake up.
You're
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a huge sort of support network to walk away from and say goodbye to. But no, that it was a decision that I've realised now was definitely the right
The
one. Was the
right
right
one.
time for me. Yeah.
Aaron Trevor says, "It's so nice that you get parkrun so well. Have you done much parkrun tourism?"
I have. So, I don't know, I think I've been to about 10 park runs. I absolutely love park run tourism. So, done a couple in London when I've been working down there on a weekend. So, wherever I find myself on a Saturday morning, if I'm away on a Friday night and I'm away working somewhere, my first thing I think is there a park run nearby? That really is my thought process. I've not done one abroad yet, but I've done a couple in London. I've done Wormwood Scrubs, which was pretty cool, by the Prism.
Yeah.
I've done, I think it was Brentwood, which is another one in West London. I've done a few in the northwest. So I've done Congleton, I've done Shrewsbury, which is my local one, Chadderton Park in North Manchester. Oh, I can't think where else. I've done a few. I'd like to do more. So I do often.
So
No, I want to embrace more park run tourism events.
Oh, Emma Parrott says Laura Kenny versus Katie Archibald in a head-to-head race. Who wins? But she says in the velodrome, not at park run.
Oh, that's a really difficult question. So both of those were my teammates in Rio. So both reigning Olympic champions, both extremely talented. That's a really difficult one to call. I'm going to be very diplomatic and say that it would be a very good race to watch. Tactically, they're both really good. Physically, they're both amazingly strong. There's really not much to choose between them, but they're different athletes. I think Laura's probably got maybe slightly more top end speed, but Katie's probably more powerful. So I'm going to sit myself right on the fence there and not give you an answer. But I'd like to see that happen. That would be a good sort of showdown to see head to head.
Yeah. And Richard Baker says, "What bike do you have at home?"
Oh, I have a Cervelo road bike. So that was my bike as part of the GB team, British Cycling. So I kept that when I retired. I've also got a town bike, like a proper, like sort of baby blue with a basket on the front, like that's it for sort of riding around town on. And I've got a mountain bike, a Trek mountain bike as well. So I've currently got 3 bikes. I would like another one. I'm in the market for a commuter bike at the moment. I think I need something lighter than the town bike, but not as light as my racing bike. So they say N+1 when it comes to bikes, N being the current number of bikes you own, and N+1 being the number of bikes you should be owning. So yeah. Always on the lookout.
There's never too many. You see, it's a bit like trainers for park run, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
exactly.
And just before we wrap up, we have some viewer comments. So Nicola Meikle says, "This is so amazing." Thank you, Nicola. And Emma Parrott says, "How awesome is it that world record holding athletes are inspired by park run? It really is such a special thing." And Jenny Lowe says, "If you're ever in Scotland, we would love to welcome you at Vogrie Park Run."
Oh, brilliant! Yes.
And Lloyd Junior Park Run are just asking, what is your favourite volunteer role?
Oh, I really like tail walking because I sort of like seeing a different side to the park run event. But I think I like marshalling because you get to cheer on everybody, especially like my park run. We have sort of 2 laps, and I really like marshalling on the hill, just before the top of the hill, and you literally get to cheer on everybody twice. So I do really enjoy. I really enjoy the marshalling out on the course somewhere, and you get to see everybody. If however many laps you've got and cheer everybody on. I think that's my favourite.
Well, what a great way to wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time this evening, Jo, and thanks to everybody who's tuned in. You can catch up with Jo on Twitter and Instagram via @JoRowsell MBE, of course.
Yeah, that's the Twitter.
MBE, yeah. Do check out.
I think Jo Rowsell was taken. That's why I had to put the MBE on there. And I think Joanna Rowsell was taken.
If you've got an MBE, you've got to get it in there.
There you go.
Do check out the many parkrun social media channels in the UK and across the world, as well as subscribing to the various parkrun podcasts out there. Now, more than ever, it's important that we all come together and support each other. The parkrun family is there for us all, and we will get through this together. Thanks so much, Jo.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.